5-minute break, because we're going to push right through. This last speaker never puts enough material together to fill a full hour, unfortunately. So we're going to push right through and finish this up and get you on your way today. What I'm going to talk about real quick is vacant facilities. But before I get to that, I do want to let you know, both Evelyn and Brian earlier talked about the program and needing it to be okay. And I do want to let you know that I think there's only one county in our program that the county commission has not approved a safety and health program in their county. They all needed to do that in order to get our safety credits that we used to give, our safety dividends that we used to give. And for those of them who haven't updated it, we are now making the safety program a part of dividend process. That now that we've got some extra money in our program, that we don't think we need to pay claims, so we'll be returning that to the counties. And one of the ways that counties get some of that money back is by their commitment to their safety program. So if you're one of those counties where they approved the safety program years ago and they haven't updated it, and you're concerned about that, we'll be pushing from our end too to get that done. So, but generally in my conversations with the commissioners, their concern is a budgetary one. Not that they don't want safety in their county. They are very supportive of the safety program. They just need to balance that with the budget that they have to deal with. So we'll be helping you out in that from that aspect. All right, vacancy issues. We run into this. And Corby has a couple claims every single year, it seems like. And it seems like such a simple issue, but it's surprising how many people fall into this trap and don't realize it. One of the big issues that counties don't really see it coming, because with our program, because counties have lots of seasonally vacant buildings, you take on buildings that are vacant when you get them from different sources. The school district has an old building and they sell it to you for $1, and it's vacant for a while until you figure out what you're going to do with it. Or you build the new jail and you've got the old jail just sitting there empty for a while until you sell it to somebody else. So unlike the standard property policies that you buy in the standard insurance company, from the standard insurance company, we don't have the standard vacancy exclusion, which says that if more than 70% of your building is vacant, it's considered vacant and there's no coverage on it. So if it burns to the ground and you don't have a special endorsement for that building, you've got no coverage on it. We don't do that, which kind of gives you that false sense of, okay, it's not a problem to have a vacant building. It's still a problem when that building burns to the ground. The other thing is certainly these properties present a higher risk of loss, and they're more prone to larger losses. We heard from Weber County earlier today that just having the transfer station closed on the weekend created what could have been a real small loss, but would have happened during the weekday, into a really large loss because it happened when nobody was around. And that's generally what we see with that too. And then again, we have these seasonal vacancies that a lot of counties have buildings that just get shut down during the winter. And so you need to deal with them on a regular basis. Here, let's run through just a couple of the issues quickly. And I know this is really common sense, but it's surprising how you forget common sense sometimes when you're trying to save money. And I brought this to you today because I just had a county this year again. They built a new building, they moved all their employees into the new building, and then they have the old building sitting empty, they think, and after a while they called me and they were like, we just want to make sure that everything's okay. We've got the old building sitting there and it's empty, and to save, it's costing us about $1,500 a month to heat the thing because it's huge. We're going to turn off the heat. Okay? Yeah, and so we started talking about, do you have a sprinkler system in there? Oh yeah, we do, and we realized that if we shut off the heat, we'd have freezing pipes, so we're gonna drain the pipes. Okay, and so what happens if there's a fire? You know, what is, well, it's a concrete building, you know, the chance of fire isn't that much. I said, so you've got nothing in there of value. Well, actually, all the old records are in there, and departments have started to recognize that there's now a storage facility, and so they're you know, we've got boxes moving in there all the time. So they're increasing the fire hazard, taking away the fire suppression, and turning off the heat. And they were going to do that to save $1,500 a month during the winter. Not a good choice, a good way to save some money. Not only do you have the obvious frozen pipes issue when you turn off the heat, but a lot of the buildings, depending on the structure of the roof, excuse me, you end up with roof damage due to ice dams and other types of things without having, you know, that building operating the way it was meant to with proper heat. You can also, if the floor is older and already has some cracks, and now you're leaving it vacant and there's some dripping and water getting into those cracks, you're going to see that propagate even faster without heat. And then just the additional shrinkage and expansion of your buildings, and you guys see that all the time, even trying to keep the buildings at constant temperature throughout the year, the different shrinkage and expansion that you have in the buildings and the damage that can do. So turning off the heat is just going to elevate that. The water, again, turning off the water when you have a sprinkler system is never a good idea. And if it isn't a sprinkler system, if that building doesn't have a fire suppression system in it, you're talking about the other ones. Again, make sure you're looking at the cost of winterizing and cleaning out those pipes, so you're not leaving some water in them only to, you know, have the flood happen when you turn the water back on. The sprinkler systems, again, they need to have adequate pressure to work. So if you're shutting down different systems and you're changing the whole operation and the way that the building it isn't operating the way that it was meant to originally, those sprinkler systems might not work the way that they were expected to if you've lowered the heat, turned off other water sources and things, and changed the pressure in the building by turning off the other places where water was used in the past. And that, you know, on-off type process of, well, we're gonna turn it back on in the spring, so that if there's a fire during the summer, we've got fire suppression, but in the winter it's just too costly, we're gonna shut it down, and that on and off can also cause damage to your sprinkler system. So be sure you're working with the professionals on that if you really get to that point. And frozen pipes on the system, you know, you may not know that those cracks are there, particularly if you're using a dry system to start with, and you turned off the heat, and somehow the pipe has gotten damaged because of the cold weather, and now you don't know that the leak is there until there's a fire going on, and you're losing all your pressure in a broken pipe, and it's not getting into the sprinkler head. And again, some policies are written for certain facilities based on the fact that they do have a fire suppression system, and so they get a better rate because of that fire suppression system. If you turn off your fire suppression system, that in itself can suspend your coverage on the building. Not as a member of USIP, but if you have other buildings that you're responsible for, and they're talking about turning off the sprinkler system, you better check and make sure that you don't have that insured as a highly protected property, because you're invalidating the coverage by turning off the sprinkler system. Fire. When you've closed that building down and you've limited access because of some of the other exposures that we're going to talk about in a minute, you got to consider, is there adequate access to the building now if the fire department has to come out and fight a fire? putting gates up and locking gates and doing those sorts of things, at least make sure you're coordinating with the fire department so that they recognize what they're gonna need to do to get at the building and to fight a fire there. Your alarm system, if there was one and now the building is vacant, who's checking to make sure that the alarm system is up and running and the batteries are refreshed and those sorts of things? You know, you may think we're okay because it's got the alarm system out there, but if nobody's out there and maintaining the building on a regular basis, the alarm system might not be working. It might not be ready to go. Again, the sprinklers are regularly an issue with fires, particularly when the building is vacant and it's not being operated the way it was meant to. Also with fires, when your building is vacant and you are increasing the risk of fire in that building, consider what your neighbors have next to you as well. Particularly if you're in a downtown type area and you're leaving a building vacant, you're going to be responsible for damage to your neighbors' buildings and your, any other damage that you do to their property as a result of a fire that starts in your building. So really consider that. Who's got what nearby that a loss by fire could cause some additional third-party damage as well. Storage in vacant buildings is always an issue for fire because employees do. Hey, did you hear that they cleaned out the old highway shop? We can take all these old boxes that we've been tripping over for years, get them out there, and we've reduced our safety hazard in our building because we got rid of all those old boxes. Well, now you've just created a huge fire safety hazard in a building that nobody's regularly keeping an eye on, and may still have some value to the county. You know, this county that called me earlier this year and asked about making this building vacant, I asked him, well, what value does the building have? What are your plans with it? Oh, well, it'll take a little while, but we're going to sell it to the city, and we're going to get some good money out of it. So we want to keep it insured, but yet they're talking about almost certainly doing damage to the building by shutting it down and not heating it and really putting it at risk to burn it to the ground if there was a fire, when it really does still have a lot of value to it. So watch the storage that shows up in your seasonally vacant buildings as well as those that become vacant and you haven't dealt with them before. Theft and vandalism is another risk that significantly increases at the point that you leave a building vacant. Generally, again, you don't have alarm systems in them. You're not using it. Why would you be spending money on an alarm system in a building that nobody's really using other than for storage of old junk? Especially when they're clearly vacant, and a lot of you from the rural counties, when a building is sitting empty, everybody knows that building's sitting empty. So it is a target for theft and vandalism, especially if there is some storage still in that building. People will break in just to see what's in those boxes. And again, the security and maintenance, that's if they see that regularly there's someone out there securing the building and maintaining the building, and windows aren't left broken for weeks at a time and things like that, they'll be less prone to showing up because there's a possibility that, they may be here at the time, or they're going to know tomorrow that I broke in here and they're going to catch me. So anything you can do to have someone show up at these buildings on a regular basis is going to help. And then there's also just the fact that vacant buildings become an attractive nuisance. For a lot of people, it's shelter. A lot of our counties have transient people that they see an empty building and they call it home. So, when I went to work, I worked in Nebraska, and we had an older building that the league was in, and the third floor used to be all apartments years and years ago, and nobody had been up there for years. And And so when they hired me as the new risk manager for the cities there, I went up to our third floor of the League's building that was literally a block and a half from the state capitol, and no one had ever gone in there and cleaned out all the old furniture and mattresses and things that the old renters left when they moved out. And as I walked through, there were piles of cigarette butts and beer cans and beer bottles and stuff, where obviously people had gotten into the building, teenagers had gotten in and used it as a party place over the years. And it was real clear, and I finally figured out how. I had lived in an apartment very nearby the building, and one morning I was walking to work really early in the morning, and I noticed there were people up on our roof. I couldn't figure out where they were from. Well, we were about this far from the apartment building next door. And the kids were jumping out of their bedroom window onto the roof of our building and, you know, having picnics on the top of our building, and then they had found a way to get into the back door on the third level to be able to get inside the building and have their parties in there. And I know we're in a conservative state in Utah here, but I'm pretty sure that in every one of your counties, there's a few teenagers with beer and cigarettes. And they're looking for a place out of sight to use. And these make perfect areas. And the fact that some of these buildings, you know, are perfect open areas for different types of sports. When I was a college student, we had an old gymnasium at my university that they had shut down years earlier, and no one used it. It just sat empty. And I worked for the maintenance department, so I knew it sat empty. And I had a ring of keys. And 3 nights a week, me and all my buddies were there playing floor hockey on the old gymnasium floor. Because I wasn't a risk manager back then. So, you know, when you close down these buildings again, and think about the things that people might want to get in there for and minimize them, and minimize the potential that they can get in there, because that's where the fire hazards increase. If you've got people in there leaving cigarette butts on the floor and digging through the boxes to see what's in them, things like that. You know, we have a loss almost every year. We have something happen, frozen pipe or small fire, things like that at vacant buildings. So they're easy to forget because they're vacant. Nobody cares about them, at least not right now. But the more you can keep them in front and schedule someone to go out and check on them on a regular basis. That's all I had.